Hi, Rama. It's week 5, day 2 of our Bible narrative reading plan. Today we're in Genesis chapter 27, where we see a fascinating picture of God's mercy. Well, we begin the passage with Isaac, and Isaac is an old man. He believes that he is nearing the end of his life, and so he calls his son Esau to him, Esau being the oldest, and he says, Esau, it's time for me to bless you. So go out and prepare my favorite meal for me so that I might bless you. So Esau is out, he's on his way. He's out there hunting. It should take him a while. But Isaac's wife, Rebekah, Jacob and Esau's mother, she overhears this, and she acts very deceptively. There's no other way of stating it. Now, Rebekah does know what God had spoken to her when the children were in her womb, that the tides were going to be turned, that this was going to be a reversed situation, that the older would serve the younger. She knows this, and yet it seems like she's not trusting that God would arrange this in the way that God had designed. And so Rebekah's taking the matter into her own hands, and she tells Jacob, she calls him in and says, look, your father's about to bless Esau. We've got to stop this. I need you to act deceptively here. Remember, Jacob's name means being a deceiver. And Jacob at first balks. He says, no, this isn't going to work. And Rebekah essentially says, no, trust me, we can make this work. And so Rebekah very much is responsible for this situation, even as Jacob is. He's not in the clear in this situation at all. And so Rebekah, verse 13, takes the curse upon herself and says, look, if anything happens, if your father curses you, I will take that curse. But here's what you need to do. And so Rebekah participates in this with Jacob. She dresses Jacob up like Esau to make him seem to be hairy, because Esau was a very hairy man even from his birth. He was hairy, and he was an outdoorsman. Remember, we saw the differences in these two children, and it carried on even into their adulthood. They're very different personalities, even body types, and just their personalities. Everything about them is different. And so Rebekah is helping Jacob act deceptively toward Isaac, her husband. And so Isaac goes in and he announces himself, not Isaac, Jacob goes into Isaac and says, here I am, Father, I'm ready for my blessing. And he says, who are you? And this is an opportunity that Jacob has to not lie to his father, but he breaks the commandment, and he says, no, I'm your son Esau. And Isaac's not believing it at first. He tells him to come closer, and he smells him and touches the hair on his hands and all this stuff. And finally, Isaac says, well, my ears must be wrong, because it doesn't sound like Isaac. It doesn't sound like Esau. It sounds like Jacob. And yet my smell, my nose, and my hands, my sense of touch, these must be right. It must actually be Esau. And so he blesses him. He tells him, Genesis 27, verse 29, let peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. That language sounds familiar. It sounds like what God said to Abraham. Isaac clearly believes that Esau is to be the recipient of the covenant, even though God had already told Rebekah something different when she was pregnant with these children. Isaac seems to believe that no, the normal pattern is that the oldest son receives the blessing, and so that seems to be what Isaac was attempting to carry out. And God uses this deception by Rebekah and Jacob to reverse the fortunes here. And so not long after Jacob leaves out, Esau comes in, and he's got the meal ready, and he says, I'm ready for my blessing, Father. And I just pause and remember that Esau didn't think very highly of what God was doing. He had already given up his birthright, but for some reason he thinks now he's ready to receive this blessing. The birthright and the blessing go hand in hand, but he had already willingly given that up to Jacob. He tries to say that Jacob deceived him, and in one sense he did, but Esau didn't think highly of God's work, his covenant faithfulness at all. But now he comes into Isaac and says, I'm ready to receive my blessing, and things begin to become apparent to Isaac. And Isaac realizes that something is terribly wrong. He shakes violently. He's very upset, very terrified at what's going on. And he says, son, I can't reverse what I've done. I have blessed your younger brother Jacob. And perhaps what God told Rebekah is now coming to his mind. We can't know for sure. The text doesn't say. But Isaac stands fast and he says, no, I have blessed your brother Jacob and he will receive the blessing. And Esau says, oh, but can't you give me some sort of blessing? And so Isaac does bless Esau, but even in that, he maintains that the younger will be served by the older. Older brother Esau will be subservient to his younger brother Jacob. He says there in verse 40, by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break his yoke from your neck. And we see that played out in the Old Testament, that Esau's descendants, the Edomites, often rebelled against the nation of Israel, often fought back and escaped and got their own freedom at different times. But we see here that Esau is violently mad at his brother Jacob. He vows revenge. He vows murder. He says, as soon as my father Isaac dies, I am going to kill my brother. And so this shapes what comes next in the story, as we're going to keep seeing that Esau is very angry towards Jacob. And Rebekah, the mother, realizes that if this all comes to bloodshed, she's likely going to lose both of her sons. And something that's not emphasized as much, something we might pass right by, is that at the end of chapter 26, and then again here at the end of 27, you have this reminder that not only did Esau not value his birthright, he also married ungodly women. He married foreign women who would lead him astray into false worship. And so Rebekah at the end of chapter 27 is concerned about who Jacob marries. Jacob is not yet married, and Rebekah is very concerned about that he not marry an ungodly woman. And so that shapes what's going to happen next. The New Testament comments on these stories and Malachi, Old and New Testament, both refer back to what happens here with the story of Jacob and Esau, because we recognize that Esau is not acting nobly. He's not acting honorably. Jacob is acting sinfully, Esau is acting sinfully, and yet it's of God's own choosing, God's own mercy, that he chooses Jacob over Esau. We can't fully understand that, but we have here a picture of God's good and sovereign mercy towards sinners. Here's a summary of today's narrative. For more information, go to tunemyheart.org.